She was a seamstress from Philadelphia with soft hands and $55 to her name. Then a telegram arrived. Her uncle was dead, and she'd inherited a ranch she'd never seen. When she stepped off that stagecoach, the lawyer took one look at her city dress and told her the truth. The ranch was drowning in debt, the cattle were starving, and she didn't know the first thing about survival. "Sell it," he said. "Go home before this valley kills you." But Clara had nothing to go back to, so she stayed. The neighbor, a hard man named Ethan Hale, rode up and told her straight, "You're going to die out here." He wasn't being cruel, he was stating a fact. She couldn't ride a horse, couldn't mend a fence, couldn't tell a sick cow from a healthy one. So why did this man, who expected her to fail, start showing up every morning at 6 to teach her how to survive? And what happens when a blizzard hits? Her cattle scatter into the storm, and she has to choose between playing it safe or risking everything she has left. This story proves that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about the simple refusal to quit. It's about turning fear into grit and challenges into opportunities. The meaning. Clara didn't just inherit a failing ranch. She inherited the chance to become someone new. The land that tried to break her instead forged her into the woman she was always meant to be. If this story resonates with you, drop a comment and tell me. Have you ever had to prove yourself when everyone expected you to fail? Hit subscribe so you never miss a story that matters. And if someone in your life needs to hear this today, share it with them. One story can change everything. The stagecoach ride was rough, and the journey rattled Clara down to her bones. A man selling whiskey with teeth stained brown from tobacco made it plain he thought a woman had no business traveling alone. Clara just stared out the dusty window at the Colorado landscape. After 26 years in Philadelphia, where the sky was just a sliver between buildings, this huge, empty land felt like another world. The words on the telegram were burned into her memory after 3 weeks. Still, she pulled the wrinkled paper from her pocket. It said her Uncle Jonathan was gone. He had left his property, the Valley Creek Ranch, to her. She needed to come right away. She barely knew the man. She had met him only twice, once as a little girl, and again at her father's funeral. Her mother called him the wild brother who picked cows over people. Now, 14 years later, he had left his entire world in her hands. The driver yelled back that they were about 15 minutes from Valley Creek. The whiskey salesman just snorted. He said calling it a creek was being generous these days. Clara asked him what he meant. He grinned a terrible grin and told her the whole valley was dying. For 5 years, it had been choked by drought and disease. Most folks had already packed up and left. He said the only ones left were either too stubborn or too broke to go anywhere. Then he leaned in close, his breath smelling of liquor, and asked if her uncle was the stubborn one or the broke one. Clara quietly replied that he was probably both. Just then, the stagecoach came over a ridge. The valley opened up below them, looking like a raw wound in the earth. It was a vast, empty bowl of brown grass. Clara could see her new home from there. It was a sad sight with a sagging barn and a house with a hole in the roof. The few cattle she saw were painfully thin. The drummer pointed to it. He said that was the Whitmore place, the one that looked like it was praying for a strong wind to finish it off. The town of Valley Creek was just one muddy street. It had a general store, a saloon, and a lawyer's office with faded paint. The whole town had fewer people than her old city block. A man stepped out of the lawyer's office as Clara climbed down from the coach. He was thin, with tired eyes, and introduced himself as James Mitchell, the lawyer. He did not offer to shake her hand. Instead, he just said her situation was complicated and they should talk inside his office. Complicated was putting it mildly. The office was small and cold. Mr. Mitchell laid it all out for her. He said her uncle was a proud and stubborn man who refused to ask for help. The ranch was failing badly, and he just let it happen. Clara cut straight to the point and asked him just how bad things were. She knew that bad news never gets better with time. The lawyer showed her a book filled with numbers. The debt was written in red ink, and there was a whole lot of it. Her uncle had borrowed money for cattle that died and for a well that never found water. The cost to fix the fences alone was more than all the living animals were worth. Mr. Mitchell looked at her with pity in his eyes. He told her the best thing she could do was sign the ranch over to the bank. She could take whatever little money was left and go back home. Clara asked how much she could expect to get. He said maybe $50, but maybe nothing at all. She had arrived with $55 to her name. That was all she had after 2 years of sewing 12 hours a day in a factory. So she asked him what would happen if she did not sign it over. What would it take to keep the ranch? The lawyer stared at her for a long moment. He asked if she knew anything at all about ranching, about cattle, or about surviving a Colorado winter. Clara had to admit that she did not. He closed the book with a heavy thud. He told her that trying to keep the ranch would be suicide. This valley had killed her uncle, a man who knew what he was doing. It would kill her even faster. Clara looked down at her hands, which were made for sewing, not for hard labor. She thought about the miserable life she had left behind in Philadelphia and the nothing she would be returning to. She looked up at the lawyer and said she wanted to see the property. Mr. Mitchell sighed but agreed to take her. As they rode out in the wagon, he warned her that seeing the ranch would not change the numbers. But Clara had to see it for herself. She had to know what she was up against. Mitchell, the lawyer, pointed out spreads that had gone bust. He told her folks were selling out for 1/10 of what they put in. The Hendersons had tried to tough it out, but then his wife died having a baby. Henderson just up and left it all behind. Clara took in this long story of defeat. The valley might have been a real beauty once, with mountains cradling the grasslands and cottonwoods lining the creek. Now it just felt haunted, like the land itself was in mourning. They came over a little hill, and Mitchell stopped the wagon. "Well, there she is," he said softly. "The Whitmore Ranch." Clara had seen it from a distance before, but that had been a kindness. Up close, you could see the ruin was total. The house was a 2-story place that probably looked real nice 30 years back. Now its porch was sagging and busted windows were boarded up. Part of the roof had caved in, leaving the top floor open to the sky. The barn was even worse, with crooked doors and daylight shining through the walls. The corrals were just a mess of busted rails. All the equipment, a rusted-out plow and a wagon with 2 wheels gone, looked like the bones of some creature that died hard. And the cattle, maybe 30 of them, stood by a trough slimy with green algae. They were so skinny their ribs stuck out like a washboard. One was down and didn't look like it was getting up. "Your uncle passed on 3 weeks ago," Mitchell said. His heart gave out while he was up there trying to patch the barn roof. "He was there for 2 whole days before anyone found him. The neighbors have been checking on the stock since, but he waved a hand at it all. Folks can only give so much when they're barely scraping by themselves." Clara climbed down from the wagon. Her good city boots sank into a mix of mud and manure. The smell hit her hard, a sour smell of decay and failure. She walked to the house, feeling Mitchell watching her, likely expecting her to faint. The front door was unlocked and groaned open on rusty hinges. The inside was a bigger disaster than the outside. You could tell her uncle lived alone. The main room was a kitchen, dining room, and living room all in one, and every bit of it was filthy. Dirty dishes were piled high in a basin. The stove was thick with old grease. The table was covered in bills and letters from the bank that he never answered. What little furniture there was looked broken. In the corner, a bed with a lumpy mattress was all torn up by mice. A single trunk likely held all Jonathan Whitmore owned in the world. The second floor was just gone, ruined by the rain and snow coming through the collapsed roof. Clara stood right in the middle of it all, trying to picture a life here. She tried to see how this place could ever be a home. She tried to imagine becoming the kind of woman who could save it. She just couldn't see it. "I have seen enough," she said, her voice low. Mitchell looked relieved. "I'll get the papers for you to sign tomorrow." "No," Clara said. "I've seen enough to know where I need to start." The lawyer just stared. "Miss Whitmore, you can't mean that." "I plan on staying here tonight," she went on. "Tomorrow I'll need to head into town for supplies, cleaning supplies first. Then I need to find someone who can teach me about raising cattle. He looked shocked. "You cannot be serious." Clara turned to him, and the look on her face made him take a step back. It was cold and hard, the look of a woman with absolutely nothing left to lose. "Mr. Mitchell, I have $55, no useful skills, and not a clue what I'm doing. If I go back to Philadelphia, that money is gone in 3 months. Then what? Another factory job? Another boarding house sharing a bed with strangers? Another man promising me the world just to steal the little I have?" She shook her head. "Out here, if I fail, it will be my own doing. It will be my choice. Can you understand that?" Mitchell was silent for a while. Then he let out a long sigh. "Your uncle told me nearly the same thing 5 years ago, right before the drought hit. And did you tell him he was wrong?" "Yes. This valley broke him." "Then I reckon I will be wrong too," Clara said. She looked around the wrecked room. "But I'm staying all the same." After Mitchell left, shaking his head and certain she was a fool, Clara used the last bit of daylight to make the house a little more livable. She found an old broom and swept out the worst of the filth. She found a well out back with water still in it, though she had to crank the rusty pump for 5 minutes straight. She hauled bucket after bucket inside and heated them on the stove, which took her another hour to figure out. By dark, she had a small corner of the room clean enough to sleep in. She laid her coat on the floor and used her trunk for a pillow. The night sounds here were a world away from Philadelphia. There was only the wind whistling through the broken boards, the skittering of mice, and the low moans of the cattle. The silence was so deep it felt like it was pressing in on her. Clara lay there looking up at the stars through the holes in the roof, and felt the true weight of her choice. She did not know how to do any of this. She couldn't ride a horse or fix a fence or read the weather. She had city hands in a place that would punish her for being green. And yet there was something freeing about being in so far over her head. In the city, she was always one step away from ruin, always scrambling and always scared. Here, the ruin had already come and gone. She was at the very bottom, with nowhere left to fall. The only thing left to do was climb. She must have dozed off because the sound of hoofbeats woke her with a start. Gray dawn light was coming through the windows. Her whole body ached from the hard floor. The hoofbeats stopped right outside. Clara stood up, pulling her coat tight, and looked through a dirty window. She saw the shape of a man on a horse against the sunrise. He was a big man, with a hat pulled down low. He sat on his horse like he was born there. He was just staring at the house. Clara opened the door, and his eyes snapped right to her. Even in the weak light, she could see his face was weathered and his eyes were sizing her up like she was a calf at an auction. "You're the niece," he said. It was not a question. "Clara Whitmore." He gave a short nod. "Ethan Hale. My spread is north of here. I'm your neighbor." His voice was gravelly, like he did not use it much. "Saw smoke from your chimney last night. Came to see if it was you or just buzzards picking the place clean." Clara felt a spark of anger. "And if it had been buzzards? Then I would have told them to get a move on. This place needs doing much clearing out." He looked right past her, his eyes taking in the sorry state of the house. His face was like stone, but she knew he was tallying up every busted board and broken window. "You aimin' to stay?" "Yes. For how long? For as long as it takes." Ethan Hale finally looked at her, and for a second his cold expression flickered with something else. Maybe it was surprise, or he just plain didn't believe her. "Ma'am, you know the first thing about running a ranch?" "No." "Can you ride a horse?" "No." "Can you rope, brand, mend a fence, shoe a horse, or help a calf being born?" "No." He stayed quiet for a long moment. Then he said real soft, "Well then, you're gonna die out here." A cold feeling settled deep in Clara's chest. It was not fear. She was already plenty scared. This was something harder, like certainty. "Maybe," she said, her voice steady, "but I have to try. And Mr. Hale, if you rode all the way out here to tell me to quit, you wasted your time. The answer is still no." Hale just watched her as the morning light grew. She could see him better now, a man in his mid-30s, his dark hair getting gray at the sides. He had a hard jaw and hands that were scarred from the kind of work that would tear her own to pieces. "The cattle need to be fed," he said at last. "I have hay in my barn. I will bring some over." Clara was taken aback. "Why would you do that?" "Because they are starving, and I cannot stand to watch an animal suffer." He gathered up his reins. "Do not think this is charity, Miss Whitmore. I am not helping you. I am helping them. I cannot pay you." "I know." "Then why?" "Because your uncle, for all his faults, was a man who tried. That has to count for something." Hale turned his horse to leave. "I will be back in an hour." He was gone before Clara could say another word, vanishing into the gray morning. She stood on that rickety porch, shivering and looking at the ranch. Her ranch. The words felt strange. The cattle were moving slowly, their breath making little clouds in the cold air. The barn looked like a collapsed dream, and the fences leaned over like tired old men. Everything out here was either dead or on its way. Everything but her. Clara went back inside and got the fire going. She had $55, no useful skills, and a neighbor who figured she was already a ghost. She had no good reason to think she could make it. But going back to Philadelphia, back to the factory and the endless poverty, was just another way to die. At least out here, if she was going to fail, she would do it on her own terms. Through the window, she saw Ethan Hale returning with a wagon full of hay. He did not even glance at the house, just got to work feeding the hungry cattle. Clara watched him, trying to memorize every single move. She had told him the truth. She did not know a thing about this life, but she was a quick study. She had to be. This broken-down ranch was the only thing she had left in the world, and she would not let it beat her without a fight. Ethan Hale worked in silence, and Clara gave him his space. She watched from the porch as he moved among the cattle. He would toss hay from the wagon, and the bony animals would crowd around, desperate for the food. He put his hands on each one, checking them over with a practiced eye. When the feeding was done, he walked the fence line, testing the posts. He did not write anything down, but she knew he was making a list in his head of all the things that were broken, which was pretty much everything. Finally, he came over to the house. Clara walked down the steps into the mud. "Thank you," she said. He just nodded. "That is about 3 days of feed. They will need more after that." "I will figure it out." She saw the doubt in his eyes, even if his face did not change. "Will you?" "I have to." He looked at her hard for a second, then swung up onto his horse in one smooth motion. "The land does not care what you have to do, Miss Whitmore. It only knows what you can do." He took up the reins. "You have got a dozen rotten fence posts I can see from here. Your water trough is foul. At least 3 of your cattle have hoof rot, and that one over by the barn will not last the week." He was not finished. "Your barn roof is about to blow off, and this house is not much better." Each word hit her like a stone, but she kept her face calm. "Is that all?" "No," he said, "but it is a start. You ought to sell this place and go home. I am not leaving." "Then you are a fool." "Probably," Clara said, "but I am a fool who owns a ranch." For just a second, a flicker of something like respect crossed his face. Or maybe she just imagined it. "When you change your mind, my offer is still good." He rode off, leaving her standing there in the mud. She was surrounded by dying cattle and the proof of how little she knew. She spent the rest of the day just trying to make the house livable. It was harder than factory work. This was hauling bucket after bucket of water until her arms burned and scrubbing floors on her hands and knees until her back ached. By nightfall, she had one room that was mostly clean. She found some old supplies in her uncle's trunk, flour with bugs in it, dried beans, and stale coffee. She made a sorry meal and ate it at the table, too tired to even taste it. The mice came out when it got dark, scurrying in the walls. She was too worn out to care. She slept on the floor again, dreaming of the city she had left behind. But when she woke up in the cold dawn, she felt strangely thankful for the hard floor and the chilly air. The new morning brought new troubles. It took her 30 minutes to get the stove lit. The water pump was frozen solid, and when she finally got outside to see the cattle, she found one of them was dead. It was the sick one Hale had pointed out. Clara just stood there staring at the body. She had never seen a dead cow before. In the city, death was different, smaller. This was big and real, and it was her responsibility. She had no idea what to do. The sound of a horse made her turn around. Ethan Hale was riding up again. Clara felt a strange mix of relief and shame. She was relieved because he would know what to do, and ashamed because she needed him to. He got off his horse and walked over. He looked at the dead animal, then at her. "How long?" "I just found it this morning." "But how long has it been dead?" Clara shook her head. "I do not know how to tell." Hale knelt down beside it, checking things she did not understand, like the eyes and the stiffness of the legs. "Probably died late last night," he said, standing up. "You need to get it away from the others before they get sick." "How am I supposed to move it?" He looked at her, and for the first time she saw pity in his eyes. That was somehow worse than his judgment. "You cannot," he said simply. "Not by yourself." He went to his horse and came back with a rope. "I will drag it with my horse. You will have to either burn it or bury it. I do not have a shovel. Check the barn." He tied the rope to his saddle, then looped the other end around the cow's back legs. He got on his horse and started pulling the heavy carcass across the field, away from the herd. Clara just followed behind, feeling completely and utterly useless. When he had dragged it far enough away, Hale dismounted and walked over to where the dead cow lay. He looked down at it, then back at Clara. His face was a mask of cold reality. "This is just the beginning, Miss Whitmore," he said, his voice flat. "The winter hasn't even started yet. There will be more of this. A lot more. Are you sure you're ready for that?" Clara looked from his hard face to the dead animal, then out at the broken ranch that was somehow hers. The cold was biting, and the feeling of failure was a bitter taste in her mouth. She was scared, exhausted, and completely out of her depth. For a moment, she thought about his offer, about selling the land and going back to a life she understood, even if she hated it. But then she looked at her own 2 hands, soft and blistered from just one day of work. She thought of her uncle who, for all his pride, was a man who tried. And a new feeling, stronger than fear, took hold. She met Ethan Hale's gaze, and her voice was steady when she spoke. "I don't know if I'm ready," she said, "but I'm staying, and I'm going to learn." He watched her for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. Then he gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He turned without another word, got on his horse and rode away, leaving her alone with the dead cow and the impossible task ahead. But for the first time, Clara didn't feel like a victim. She felt like a survivor. "To be cleared out." He got off his horse. "There's probably a shovel in the barn. If not, you will need to buy one." "Mr. Hale," Clara said, stopping him, "why are you helping me?" He was quiet for a good long while, just looking out at the valley. "Your uncle and we were not friends," he said at last, "but we were neighbors. Out here, that means something. He helped me once, years ago, when my herd broke a fence in a storm. He did not ask for a dime, just helped because it needed doing." He turned his gaze back to her. "I figure I owe him that much. But once this debt is paid, Miss Whitmore, you are on your own. Do you understand?" "Understood." He got back on his horse and rode off. Clara went to the barn to find a shovel. She found one buried under some junk and nearly rusted through. It took her all morning to dig a hole deep enough for the dead cow. The hard ground fought her every step. Her soft hands got blisters, and then the blisters broke and bled. Her back and shoulders screamed with pain. A few times she had to stop, leaning on the shovel just trying to catch her breath. She wondered if Hale was right, if Mitchell was right, if she was a fool. But she kept on digging. By sunset, the job was done. Clara walked back to the house, every muscle aching, and fell into a chair. Her hands were a mess of dirt and raw skin. She knew she had to clean them. Out here, a simple infection could be a death sentence. She just dropped her head on the table, bone-tired, when a sharp knock startled her. It was Ethan Hale, holding a pot. He'd left hours ago. "My cook made too much stew," was all he said, pushing it toward her. Clara was confused. "You have a cook? A working ranch needs help. Take it." The pot's heat felt good on her raw hands, and the rich smell of beef and vegetables made her stomach ache with a hunger she'd forgotten. "Thank you," she whispered. His eyes scanned past her, taking in the clean floor and tidy supplies. "You buried the cow," he stated. "It was hard work." "It had to be done," she replied. A hint of respect showed in his eyes. "Be at my ranch tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock sharp." "Why?" "Because if you are going to work yourself to death, you might as well learn to do it right." He started to leave. "Bring gloves and proper boots." "I do not have any." He let out a heavy sigh. "I will find some. 6 o'clock, Miss Whitmore. Do not you be late." Then he was gone, leaving Clara in the doorway clutching that warm pot of stew, and watched him ride off into the dark. She ate that stew, standing right there, too hungry to even think about sitting down. It was the finest meal she'd had in months, full of real beef and vegetables. She finished the whole pot until her stomach hurt from being full so fast. After bandaging her torn-up hands with cloth strips, she laid down on the hard floor, ready for whatever came next. If this land was trying to break her, it would have to try a whole lot harder. She woke with a start in the pitch black. The old clock read 4:30. She hurried, washing her face and wincing as the soap stung her blistered palms. Her wool traveling dress was the best she had, but it was made for city life, not a ranch. A piece of stale bread and some bitter coffee would have to do. When she stepped outside, the cold was a physical blow. It was not like the winters back east. This was a sharp, biting cold that went straight to the bone. That had no mercy. Without a horse of her own, the 2 miles to Hale's place felt like 20. So she started walking. The dirt track twisted through the valley, and she kept a brisk pace just to stay warm. As the sun began to rise, it painted the harsh land with surprising colors of silver sage and golden grass. She was still a ways off when she heard a horse behind her. It was Hale, leading another one. He did not seem surprised to see her on foot. "You do not own a horse?" he asked. "No." "Hard to run a ranch that way." "I am aware." He nodded to the calm-looking mare he was leading. "This here is Molly. She is 20 years old and patient. You will use her for now." "I cannot pay for—" "She is a loan, not a gift. She comes back to me when you leave." He got down and held the stirrup. "Left foot in, grab the horn and swing your other leg over." "But I'm wearing a dress." "Then you will ride poorly. Find some pants for tomorrow. Now get on. We are burning daylight." Molly the horse knew exactly what was happening, and Clara could tell. The big mare turned her head, her dark eyes filled with a kind of endless patience, maybe even a little humor. Hale's voice cut through the quiet. "Left foot in the stirrup." Clara took a breath, grabbed the saddle horn for dear life, and put her foot where he said. She tried to pull herself up, but only made it about 6 inches before her city arms gave out, and she tumbled back to the dirt. "Use your legs, not your arms," he said flatly. "Push." She tried again. This time she scrambled high enough to swing her other leg over, and suddenly she was perched on the horse, a good 5 feet off the ground, with no earthly idea what came next. "Reins in your left hand," Hale instructed. "Gentle pressure to turn. Pull back easy to stop. A light touch with your heels to go. Nothing rough. Molly knows her job. Just let her do it." He swung up onto his own horse and headed toward his ranch, never once looking back to see if she was coming. But Molly started after him on her own, a steady walk that made Clara grip the saddle horn with both hands. She fought the urge to scream. "Sit up straight," Hale called over his shoulder. "Move with the horse, not against her. And for the love of God, let go of that saddle horn." Clara tried to loosen her grip. The fact that Molly didn't buck her off right then and there felt like a win. When they came over a rise, Hale's ranch came into view, and her heart just sank. Where her own place was all rot and ruin, his was a picture of success. The house looked solid, with smoke curling from the chimney. The barn was freshly painted. The corrals were sturdy and full of healthy-looking cattle. Everything was neat, organized, and cared for. It all screamed of a competence she couldn't even imagine. His ranch was everything hers was not. As they rode into the yard, an older Mexican man with gray hair and a face lined by the sun came out of the barn. He gave a nod to Hale, then looked over at Clara, his eyes full of honest curiosity. "Diego, this is Miss Whitmore. She owns the property to the south. She'll be helping out here in the mornings for a spell." Hale then looked at her. "Miss Whitmore, this is Diego Martinez. He runs this place when I am not around." Diego broke into a wide smile, showing a few gold teeth. "Welcome, señorita. You are a brave woman to take on the Whitmore place." "Brave or foolish," Clara muttered. "I have not decided which one yet." "Ah," Diego said with a chuckle. "Often they are the same thing." Hale swung down from his horse and motioned for Clara to do the same. She managed to get down without falling, which felt like another small victory. "First lesson," Hale said, leading her to the barn. "It all starts with the animals. They eat before you eat. They get water before you do. You see to them before you rest, because if they die, you die. You understand?" "Understood," she said. Inside the barn, 6 horses stood in their stalls. "Morning chores," he began. "Check their water, check their feed, measure it out for each one. Then you check their hooves, their legs, and their eyes. Any problem you find, you deal with it right then and there." He went through the motions with his own horse, his movements sure and practiced, explaining every step. Clara tried to soak it all in, knowing full well she was only catching about half of it. "Your turn," he said. Clara walked toward Molly's stall with a good deal of nerves. The horse nickered and nudged a soft nose into her hand. "She is just saying hello," Hale said from behind her. "Go on, you can pet her." Clara reached out a shaky hand and stroked Molly's nose. Her breath was warm on her skin. "Check her water." Clara saw the bucket was half empty and looked for the pump. Hale pointed outside. She hauled the bucket out, worked the pump handle, and carried it back full. It was heavier than she thought, and water sloshed over the rim, soaking the front of her dress. "You will get stronger," Hale said, not as encouragement, but as a simple statement of fact. He made her go through the whole routine 3 times. By the end, her arms were trembling and her back ached, but she was starting to feel the rhythm of the work. "Cattle are next," Hale announced, walking her out to the corral. "Same idea. You check them every single day. Look for anything out of the ordinary. You will learn to read them." He pointed out the signs of sickness: dull eyes, heavy breathing, an animal standing off by itself. He showed her how to move among them slow and easy, using her body to guide them without causing a panic. Clara took it all in like a drowning woman gulping for air. She knew her life depended on it. "The fence," Hale said after an hour. "Let's go see your worst section." They rode back to her property with Clara feeling just a little less terrified on Molly's back. She showed him the stretch of fence where the posts leaned over and the rails were busted. Hale got down and looked it over with that same serious attention. "This post is rotted clean through. This rail is split from the frost. This wire is rusted. It all has to be replaced." He looked straight at her. "Do you know how to replace a fence post?" "No." "Know how to string wire?" "No." "Know how to use a post hole digger or a fence stapler?" "No." He just nodded. "Then you will learn. Tomorrow you bring tools. I will show you one time. After that, it is on you." "Mr. Hale," Clara said, choosing her words with care. "Why are you doing this? You said you owed my uncle, but this feels like a whole lot more than settling a debt." He was quiet for a long moment, just staring out at the valley. "I told you we were not friends," he said at last. And that was the truth. But I respected the man. He was stubborn as a mule and too proud to take help even when he was drowning. It probably put him in his grave that much faster. He turned his gaze on her. You remind me of him. You have got that same refusal to see what is right in front of your face. That same fool idea you can do the impossible. The difference is, he knew what he was doing and failed anyway. You do not have a clue, and you will fail even faster unless somebody teaches you. So this is just charity, she said, her voice tight. No, he snapped back. Charity would be me fixing this fence for you. Charity would be me running your ranch while you play make-believe. This is an education. What you do with it is your own business. But at least when you fail, it will not be because nobody offered you a chance to survive. Clara felt a hot anger rise up in her. When I fail? Not if? That is right. When? He got back on his horse. 6 o'clock tomorrow, Miss Whitmore. And wear something more practical. He rode off without another word, leaving Clara standing in the mud next to her broken-down fence. She wanted to be furious, to use his words as fuel. But a part of her, the part that knew just how lost she was, wondered if he was right. Maybe she should just sell the place and go back to Philadelphia. Back to a factory. Back to a boarding house. Back to a life she knew how to survive, even if she hated it. She looked at the sorry fence, the skinny cattle, the house with its caved-in roof. Then she thought about the stew Hale had brought her, how Diego called her brave, the soft feel of Molly's nose in her palm. Maybe she would fail, but she was not going to fail today. She spent the rest of the day putting his lessons to use. She checked her own cattle, looking for sick ones. She found 2 with runny eyes, but had no idea if it was dust or disease. She found the water trough thick with green slime, just like he said it would be. Dumping it was back-breaking work, but she scrubbed it clean and refilled it. The cattle drank from it right away, and a small flicker of pride went through her. She found her uncle's old trunk and dug out 3 pairs of his work pants. They were all too big and smelled of sweat and tobacco, but she picked the best pair and used her needle to take them in. That night, she ate the last of her salt pork and beans. The meal felt earned. She was dead asleep before it was fully dark and woke up at 4:30 in the morning, her whole body aching in protest. But she forced herself out of bed. The routine was already starting to feel normal. Start the fire, heat the water, pull on the strange-feeling pants. Then she went to check the cattle before riding Molly over to Hale's place. He was waiting in the barn with fence posts, wire, and a whole mess of tools. He had an expression on his face that said he still figured she would quit before the week was out. "This is a post hole digger," he said, holding up a mean-looking tool. "This is how you use it." For the next 6 hours, he taught her the hard and painful work of fixing a fence. Dig the hole 18 inches deep. Set the post straight. Pack the dirt tight. String the wire so it hummed with tension. 3 staples for every post. Was a pain to hold. New blisters formed right on top of the old ones on her hands. Her shoulders and back screamed in protest. And every 15 minutes she fought the urge to give up. But she never did. By noon, they had 4 new fence posts set. It was a small victory. Hale looked at her, then the fence. "You are slow, but you do not quit." Is that a compliment? It is a fact. He told her a storm was coming in 2 days. He knew by the look of the clouds and the feel of the wind. "The land talks," he said. "I will teach you to listen." And so began their routine. Every morning she would learn something new, from reading the weather to understanding cattle. Then they'd work on her place. He never helped, not really. He'd show her how to do something once, point out her mistakes, and then leave her to struggle through it. It was the hardest work she had ever known. Some days he'd just shake his head at her slow pace or her simple mistakes, but she kept at it, often falling asleep in her dusty clothes. But slowly, she was learning the ranch's secrets. She learned how animals speak without a sound, and how the sky warns of a coming snow. She discovered a strength in herself she never knew she had. 3 weeks later, the storm Hale predicted arrived right on time. He had shown her how to get ready, helping her board up windows and secure the animals before leaving her to face the storm alone. That night, the wind howled like a mad animal, and the snow wiped out the entire world. The cold seeped through the walls of the little house. Clara stayed by the stove, feeding the fire, listening to the old place groan under the storm's power. She worried about the cattle all night. When morning finally came, she waded through snow up to her knees to check on them. Most were huddled by the barn, alive. But 2 were gone, having broken through a weak spot in the fence. She was trying to figure out which way they'd run when Ethan Hale rode out of the swirling snow. "Lost 2, he stated, not asking. "I reckon they went for the creek." "We will find them," he said, already turning his horse. "Well, are you coming?" They found them 3 miles south in a ravine. One had a nasty gash on its leg. Hale talked her through roping the injured animal, a task that took her 6 tries to get right. It was late afternoon by the time they got them home, and Clara's hands were numb with cold. He showed her how to clean and treat the wound. "Check it twice a day," he instructed. "If it gets infected, she is a goner." Clara just nodded, exhausted. Hale looked at her for a long moment, his usual hard expression softening just a bit. "You should have lost more than 2, he said quietly. "What you did to prepare was barely enough. But you tried. Sometimes that is what counts." It was the closest he'd ever come to a compliment. "Thank you for the help." "Neighbors look out for each other," he said, swinging onto his horse. "Even the stubborn ones who do not know when to quit. Take tomorrow to rest. You earned it." And as he rode away, Clara felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire. She was probably going to fail. The ranch was bleeding money, the debts were a crushing weight, and she was making it up as she went. But she had made it through a winter storm. She had saved her cattle. And Ethan Hale, the man who figured she would pack it in after a week, was still teaching her how to be a rancher. That had to be worth something. Rest was a luxury Clara could not afford. The injured cow, the snow-filled water trough, and a broken fence all demanded her attention. 3 days later, while she was pounding in a new fence post, Ethan Hale rode up. He just sat on his horse watching her, and she could feel his judgment from across the yard. Her work was better, but it was still too slow. "You have not stopped," he stated. "Could not," Clara replied, driving another staple into the wood. "How is the cow?" "Mending. I have been cleaning the wound twice a day, just like you said. No infection." He swung down from his horse and checked her fence, giving the post a hard shake. He gave a single sharp nod. "Better. You are learning." Coming from him, it felt like winning a prize. "There is a ranchers' meeting in town tonight," he said. "You should be there." Clara stopped. In 6 weeks, she had only been to town twice, and both times she felt the whole town staring. A woman who did not belong, just waiting for her to give up. "Why would I go there?" she asked. "Because you are a rancher now," he said, climbing back on his horse. "And you need to know what is happening. 7 o'clock at the church. Do not be late." He was gone before she could argue. So, she arrived 10 minutes before 7, riding Molly through the dark, quiet town. Lights from the church pushed back the night, and she could hear the low rumble of men's voices inside. She tied Molly to the rail, took a deep breath, and tried to find her courage. Wearing her uncle's old clothes, she knew she looked like someone playing a part she had not yet learned. When she pushed open the door, the talking stopped cold. 20 men turned and stared. She saw Diego Martinez, who gave her a small, kind nod. She saw the lawyer, Mitchell, who looked away. And she saw Ethan Hale near the front, his face giving nothing away. "Miss Whitmore," a big man with a gray beard said. It was Thomas Garrett, who owned the largest ranch around. "This is a surprise." "Mr. Hale suggested I come," Clara said, her voice even. Garrett glanced at Ethan with a hint of a smile. "Taking in strays now, Ethan?" "I invited a neighbor," Ethan said, his voice flat. "She owns ranch land. That makes her a rancher." Owning land is not the same as being one, another man named Davis sneered. I will bet she is gone by spring. Then you will lose your money, Clara said, the words sharper than she intended. The room fell silent again. Davis just grinned. Is that right? You know about cattle prices and water rights? No, Clara admitted. But I am learning, and I am not leaving. We will see what the bank has to say about that. That is enough, Davis, Garrett said with authority. He looked at Clara. You are welcome to stay, Miss Whitmore. Find a seat in the back. It was an order, not an invitation, but she took it, feeling every eye on her. The men talked about falling cattle prices and arguments over creek access. They worried that the railroad was not coming, which made everything more expensive. Clara understood about half of it. The rest was a foreign language, but she listened hard, filing away questions for Ethan. Then, near the end, Garrett brought up something that made the whole room go still. Some of you have noticed the rustling, he said. I have lost 6 head. Patterson lost 4. This is organized. The men all started talking at once. They needed patrols, but they did not have the men to spare. The argument grew louder, and Clara realized it was not just about stolen cattle. It was about the fear of losing everything. Suddenly, Davis's voice cut through the noise. What about the Whitmore Ranch? Is she going to ride patrols? Everyone turned to look at her. I cannot, she said simply. I do not have the help. Then maybe you should not be here, Davis shot back. This is for ranchers who help each other. I did not ask for a say, Clara said, her face getting hot. I came because I was invited. Nobody is asking you to leave, Garrett said, giving Davis a hard look. But this valley survives because we work together. If you cannot do your part, that is a problem. I will take her shifts, Ethan Hale said into the silence. Every man in the room turned to stare at him. You will what? Garrett asked. I will cover her patrols, Ethan repeated, calm as ever. I am already out riding my own land at night. I can add hers to my route. That is not fair to you, Davis protested. I did not ask for your opinion, Ethan replied. Garrett looked from Ethan to Clara. Why would you do that? Because she's a neighbor, Ethan said, his tone making it clear the discussion was over. Are we done here? The meeting ended soon after. As the men filed out, Clara walked over to Ethan. You did not have to do that, she said. I know. I can fight my own battles. That was not your battle, he said. That was about shutting Davis up. Hale looked at her, his expression hard to read. You handled yourself well in there. Better than I expected. Clara stiffened. Did you expect me to cry and run out? A corner of his mouth twitched. Something like that. This ranch was her last chance, and men like him thought she was just a fragile city girl. That kind of thinking is what will make you lose everything you love. It's a lesson about standing your ground, even when you're shaking in your boots. Be at my place tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, he said, turning to leave. We need to work on your roping. It's still terrible. The next morning, he worked Clara harder than ever. Snow's coming, he said, pointing at the clouds. They practiced until her arm ached. Then he taught her about winter emergencies. If a storm hits and you lose cattle in the dark, Hale warned, you don't go after them alone. You wait for help. Dying for a cow is just plain stupid. You came after me in the last storm, Clara shot back. That was different, he grumbled. You're a person. They're cattle. I'm touched you value me more than a cow. He gave her a long look. Don't make me regret it. The storm that night felt angrier than a stirred-up hornet's nest. The wind didn't just blow, it howled and clawed at the little house. By midnight, Clara was truly scared. She could barely see the cattle huddled by the barn through the chaos. Then, around 1 in the morning, a sound made her blood run cold. It was the cattle, bellowing in pure panic. Clara threw on her coat and shoved the door open against the wind. The cold was a solid wall that stole her breath. Snow was already up to her knees. She fought her way to the barn and found a disaster. A whole section of the wall had collapsed. The spooked cattle had scattered into the storm. Hale's words echoed in her head. Wait for help. Dying for a cow is stupid. But waiting meant losing everything. Those animals were the only thing keeping her from complete ruin. Without thinking twice, Clara ran back to the house, grabbed a rope and a lantern. The moment she left the barn, the world vanished into a swirl of white. The wind tore at her, and the lantern barely cut through the darkness. She followed the panicked sounds of the cattle, pushing through snow that grew deeper with every step. She found the first cow about 50 yards out, confused and stuck in a drift. Talking to it calmly, the way Hale taught her, she managed to get a rope around its neck. But when she turned to lead it back, she couldn't find the barn. There were no landmarks, just an endless, blinding storm. Panic, cold and sharp, rose in her throat. She picked a direction and just started walking, praying it was the right one. Her legs trembled from the cold. She was about to give up, thinking Hale was right, when a dark shape appeared in the gloom. The barn. She had somehow stumbled right back to it. She got the first cow inside, her body shaking from the effort. A smart person would have stayed put and waited for daylight, just like Hale had said. But she could still hear her cattle out there, calling in the dark. So she went back out. Each trip was harder than the last. By the time she was looking for the fifth cow, Clara was barely moving. The cold had seeped deep into her bones, making her fingers useless and her thoughts slow. She found the last one, got the rope on it, and realized she was lost again. This time, her lantern was out. She was standing in pitch-black darkness, the storm screaming all around her. This was it. This was how she would die. And a strange calm washed over her. If this was the end, at least she went down fighting. Then, through the howl of the wind, she heard hoofbeats. A rider appeared out of the white darkness, moving like he was born to the storm. It was Ethan Hale. The fury on his face was clear even in the dark. "What in the hell are you doing?" he yelled over the wind. "Saving my cattle!" "You're killing yourself," he shot back. He swung down from his horse and grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. "The barn is 200 yards that way. Can you make it?" Her teeth were chattering too hard to speak, so she just nodded. "Then go. I'll get the cow." He took the rope from her frozen hands. He started to lead the animals, his confidence in the storm a thing to behold. Back at the barn, he turned to her. "How many more?" "I don't know. 3, maybe 4. His jaw was tight. "Stay here." "Like hell I will. They're my cattle," she yelled back. "My ranch, my problem. You're half frozen and lost. You'll die out there. Then I'll die trying." They stood in the doorway, the storm raging around them. She saw his anger, but underneath it she saw something else. He was afraid for her. "Please," he said, his voice suddenly quiet. "Stay here. Let me do this." "I can't," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because I have to prove I belong here," she said, the words tumbling out. Hale looked at her for a long moment, and something in his face softened. "You've already proved that." "Not to myself," she answered. He nodded slowly. "All right. Then we go together. But you stay close and you do exactly what I say." They plunged back into the storm. With Hale leading, they were a team. He read the land in ways she couldn't imagine, finding 2 more cows huddled together. The very last one was the hardest to find, nearly half a mile away and stuck in a gully. "We should leave it," Hale said, looking the animal over. "It's not going to make it." "No," Clara said, her voice firm. "We are not leaving it." He looked from her to the cow, and a small smile touched his lips. "You're just as stubborn as your uncle was." Working together, they pushed and pulled until the exhausted animal was free. As they headed back to the barn, leading the last of her herd, they were no longer just neighbors. They were partners against the storm. The cold air felt like swallowing fire with every ragged breath. They finally stumbled back into the barn as the storm gave way to the first pale light of dawn. Hale shoved the last cow inside and slumped against the wall, trying to catch his wind. Clara slid down beside him, shaking from cold and pure exhaustion. "That was the most fool thing I have ever witnessed," Hale said. "Did we get them all in?" "We did," she answered. "Then it was not foolish." He turned, and in the growing light she saw his face was soaked, exhausted, and angry. But there was something else there, maybe the ghost of a smile. "You could have died out there," he said. "So could you." "I know what I'm doing," he shot back. "I am still learning," Clara replied, meeting his gaze. "You told me ranchers help ranchers. You came into this storm for me. Why is it a fool's errand when I do the same for my own herd?" "Because cattle can be replaced," he said softly. "You cannot." The words just hung there in the cold air, heavy with a meaning she was almost afraid to touch. "I am not special," she said. "I am just a woman who inherited a failing ranch and is too stubborn to let it go." "That is what makes you special," Hale told her. He stood and offered her his hand. "Come on. We need to get you warm before you catch your death." Clara took it. His grip was strong and warm, and he pulled her to her feet. They sat at her little table, sipping on terrible coffee and listening to the storm finally lose its fight outside. The gray light got stronger and the wind began to settle down. "You saved them," Hale finally said. "Every last one. That is something." "We saved them," she corrected. "No, I helped you. But you made the choice to go out there. You refused to quit when any sensible person would have." He took another drink of the awful coffee. "Your uncle would have done the same thing. Been just as bullheaded about it, too." "Is that a compliment?" "It is an observation," he said, setting his cup down. "Clara, I need to tell you something." He had never used her first name before. It was always Miss Whitmore, always polite but distant. "When you first got here," he said, "I figured you for a week, maybe 2. I was sure this place would break you, just like it breaks everyone else." He looked her right in the eye. "I was wrong." "I have not succeeded yet," she reminded him. "The ranch is still on its last leg. But you are still here," he insisted. "You are still fighting. That means you belong here." Clara felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the stove. "The land has not accepted me. The town is still waiting for me to fail." "The town does not matter," he said, standing up. "The bank does not matter. What matters is if you can look at this place and see a home instead of a burden. I have to get back to my own place." He walked to the door, then stopped. "The spring roundup is in 6 weeks. If you can prove your cattle are healthy enough to sell, you might just have a shot at paying down that debt. It is your last chance. You understand that?" "I understand." "Then we will work every morning and every evening. I will teach you what I can. The rest is on you." "Thank you, Ethan." He gave a single nod and walked out into the dying storm. Clara watched him ride off across the snow-covered land. The sun was finally breaking through the clouds, turning the whole valley from gray to gold. It almost looked beautiful. She looked down at her hands. They were blistered and calloused, but they were strong. The woman who had arrived here 6 weeks ago, terrified and lost, was gone. In her place was someone tougher, someone who could face down a winter storm and survive. The 6 weeks before the roundup were a blur of hard work. Ethan was true to his word. He showed up every morning and every evening, pushing Clara harder than she had ever been pushed. Her body changed, growing strong in ways she never thought possible. Her hands, once soft, became tough as leather. But it was not just about muscle. Ethan taught her how to read a herd, how to speak the subtle language of horses, and how to throw a rope with dead-on accuracy. "The roundup is not just about gathering your cattle," he told her one evening. "It is about proving you can manage them. Every rancher in this valley will be watching you. They will judge you." "They have already judged me," Clara said, hammering a staple into a fence post. "Then this is your chance to prove them wrong." "Your cattle look better," he said, testing the wire. "But they are still too thin. We need to put some weight on them." "With what feed?" she asked. "I have spent every dollar I have." Ethan got quiet for a moment, the way he did when he was wrestling with a decision. "I have some extra hay. You can have it." "I cannot pay you for it, Ethan. I cannot keep taking things from you." "It is not charity." he cut her off. It is an investment. If you fail, the bank takes this land, and an empty ranch causes trouble for everyone. It is in my own best interest to see you succeed. Clara looked at his face and saw the truth he was trying to hide behind his words. He was helping because he wanted to help. The extra feed made all the difference. Over the next 3 weeks, her cattle started to fill out. They were still leaner than Ethan's herd, but it was enough to give Clara a flicker of real hope. She would need it, because the bank sent another letter. Mitchell, the banker, delivered it himself. I tried to get you more time, Mitchell said, standing in her doorway. But they are serious. If you cannot make a significant payment after the roundup, they will start foreclosure. How significant? He showed her the number on the paper. Clara's stomach turned to ice. It was an impossible amount. Even if every animal sold at the highest price, she could not make it. That is impossible, she whispered. I know, Mitchell said, looking truly sorry. Miss Whitmore, maybe it is time to face facts. You could sell the ranch to Hale, pay your debts, and leave with enough money to start over somewhere else. Start over doing what? She asked. I was a seamstress in Philadelphia. I shared a room with 3 other women. That was not living. That was just surviving. And this is not? He asked, gesturing to the struggling ranch. This is different, she said, her voice firm. Here I am building something. In Philadelphia I was just taking up space. She folded the letter. I will find a way to make the payment. How? He asked. I do not know yet, she admitted. But I will. After he left, Clara sat and stared at the impossible number. She had survived impossible things before. She had survived the winter, she had survived the storms, and she was not about to quit now. She'd been through a trial by fire that should have been the end of her. She had rescued those cattle in the dead of night when everyone else said to let them go. If she could walk through all that, maybe this was just one more fire to walk through. That night, Ethan came by for their usual training, and Clara handed him the letter. He read it without a word, his face like stone. This is what I was afraid of, he finally said. If the roundup goes perfectly, will I have enough? The silence stretched on for too long. No. The word landed like a punch to the gut. Even if you get top dollar for every head, you'll still come up short. He passed the letter back. I am sorry, Clara. Her fingers felt numb as she took the paper. So this is it. This is how I fail. You have not failed. You have done more with this ranch in 3 months than most folks could do in a year. But the numbers do not care how hard you work. A cold weight settled deep inside Clara's chest. She had always known the odds were against her, but she had held on to a sliver of hope. She hoped that sheer grit would be enough. It was not. I ought to just sell to you, she said, her voice hollow. Take what little I can and get out before the bank takes it all. You should, he agreed, but I do not want to. Ethan stepped a little closer, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. I know, but wanting is not enough to beat numbers like these. Clara looked out at her ranch, feeling like it was already slipping away. The cattle were grazing in the twilight. The fences she had mended stood tall. The barn was still worn, but it was solid. The little house felt impossibly like home. I am not ready to quit, she said. I know that too, he replied, pausing for a moment. There might be one other way. It is a long shot, probably a fool's errand, but it is a chance. Clara turned to him. Tell me. The railroad is building a new line about 30 miles north of here. They need beef for the work crews, and they need it now. They are paying a premium for it. How much of a premium? 50% over the market price. Maybe even more for good quality cattle. Clara's mind started racing. If I sold to them, I could bypass the markets entirely. You would make enough to pay the bank, Ethan finished for her, with some left over. He held up his hand. But hold on. They need the cattle in 3 weeks. That means you would have to miss the valley roundup. You would have to drive your herd 30 miles across some real rough country all by yourself. And you would need someone to speak for you with the railroad buyers. Would you speak for me? I would. But I cannot help with the drive. I have my own herd to manage for the roundup. Clara took it all in. She would be completely on her own, pushing 30 head of cattle through the mountains. She would have to deal with rivers, predators, and the weather. A dozen things could go wrong and ruin her. But if it worked, she would save her ranch. I will do it, she said. Clara, you need to understand what you are getting into. You have never driven a herd that far. That country is unforgiving. You would be alone for 3, maybe 4 days. If you find trouble, nobody's coming to help you. I understand. Do you? Because if you fail, the bank takes everything. You could lose the cattle, or you could lose your life. I understand, Clara said again. What other choice do I have? I can sell now and leave with my pockets empty, or I can take this one shot. Ethan looked at her for a long time. When did you become so stubborn? I guess I got it from my uncle, she said. A hint of a smile touched his lips. All right, then we have 2 weeks to get you ready. And Clara, this is going to make everything else we have done feel like a Sunday picnic. You have to learn skills that take most ranchers years to master. Then you had better start teaching me. Those next 2 weeks were the hardest of her life. Ethan pushed her relentlessly, preparing her for anything she might face. They practiced moving the herd through narrow gaps and across rushing water. He taught her how to navigate by the sun and the stars. He drilled her on how to scare off predators. He showed her how to make a camp without a fire, and how to sleep with one ear open for trouble. You cannot stop a stampede head-on, he told her sternly. You can only turn it. Make it run in a circle until it wears itself out. If you try to stop it, you will be trampled. They worked late into the night, because trouble always finds you in the dark. Clara learned to sense the herd's mood just by listening. She learned to fight off exhaustion and make smart decisions even when she was terrified. Diego sometimes joined them, sharing wisdom from his years of driving cattle in Mexico. The cattle, they will test you, señorita, he said. You must be firm but not mean. They have to respect you, or they will not follow. How do I earn their respect? Diego smiled. You already have. They have food and water because of you. They survive the winter because of you. They know you are their leader. Now you must believe it too. Clara tried her best to believe it. Some days she felt like a real rancher. Other days she felt like a child playing dress-up. But she never stopped working. Word got around the valley about her plan. Some folks called her brave. Most just thought she was crazy. Davis made sure to tell everyone she would lose every last cow. Let her try, Garrett said when the talk came up at the general store. Clara was there for supplies and heard him. Either she makes it or she fails. Either way, we will know. It was not exactly a vote of confidence, but she accepted it. 3 days before she was set to leave, Ethan showed up with a pack horse. Food for 5 days, a medical kit for you and the animals, extra rope and bullets for your rifle. You do have a rifle, right? I found my uncle's old one in the barn. I have no idea how to shoot it. Ethan shut his eyes for a second, as if asking for patience. Go get it. He spent the next 2 hours teaching her how to use the old Winchester. The first shot she took nearly knocked her right off her feet. The second missed the target by a country mile. But after about the 20th shot, she started hitting what she was aiming for. It is not pretty, Ethan said, but it is better than a sharp stick. Just remember, that gun is for emergencies, not for showing off. I was not planning on showing off. Good. He finished loading her horse. I marked a route on this map. It should take you 3 days if the weather holds. There are 3 river crossings. 2 are easy, 1 is tough. Stick to the high trails. It is harder on the cattle, but it keeps you safer from predators. Clara stared at the map, burning every line into her memory. 3 days alone with 30 head of cattle. 3 days to either save her home or lose it all for good. "I am scared," she admitted in a small voice. "Good," he said. "You should be." Ethan looked her square in the eye. "Fear will keep you sharp, Clara. It is getting too sure of yourself that gets you in trouble. But you can handle this. You have weathered every storm this valley has cooked up. You are tougher than you give yourself credit for." She hoped he was right. He smiled a little. "I am always right. It is a burden." Clara had to laugh, and some of that icy fear melted away. That night, sleep would not come. She lay on her bedroll, a luxury after months on the floor, and listened to the sounds of the ranch. This place, this broken-down ranch in the middle of nowhere, was her home now. Losing it would be like losing a piece of her own soul. Before the sun rose, she was up and dressed in her warmest gear. The cattle were restless, knowing something was changing. Ethan showed up as the first light hit the mountains, helping her with the last-minute checks. "Remember what I taught you," he said. "Trust your gut. Trust the animals. And if things go south, you turn back. This ranch is not worth your life." "Yes, it is," Clara whispered. Ethan's gaze softened. "Not to H." Before she could think of what to say, he was on his horse. "Good luck, Clara. I will see you in 4 days." "5," she called out. 4 days to drive, 1 to sell." He just nodded, then rode off. He looked back just once, and a warmth spread through her chest. Clara faced her herd and took a deep breath. "All right, fellas," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "Let us go earn our keep." The first day was a tough ride, but not as bad as she had braced for. The cattle knew her by now and mostly behaved. A few tried to break for home, but Clara knew how to read them. She circled them back, keeping a steady pace that ate up the miles without wearing them out. By sundown, she had covered nearly 10 miles and felt a flicker of hope. She made a small camp in a valley Ethan had pointed out on her map. As darkness fell, she sat with her rifle, listening for any sign of trouble. Just after midnight, she heard it. Wolves howling in the distance. The cattle heard them too and got nervous. Clara grabbed a burning stick from her fire and walked the edge of the herd, a silent warning to whatever was out there in the dark. The howls eventually faded and the cattle settled down. This was it, 3 more days of this. No rest, no help, just her and the mission. She had to do it. The next morning brought the first river. Ethan had called it an easy crossing, but the water was high and fast with melted snow. The herd refused to go in. Clara tried everything, even riding her horse Molly into the current to show them it was safe. They would not budge. Then she recalled something an old ranch hand, Diego, once said. "They will follow a leader they trust." She got off her horse, stood at the water's edge, and found a new voice, firm and full of command. "Move. Now." To her surprise, they listened. The whole herd moved into the river, trusting her voice more than their own eyes. She counted them as they scrambled up the far bank. 29, 30, all of them safe. She rode Molly across, the freezing water soaking her jeans, but she could not stop smiling. She had done it. By that evening, she had crossed another river and made 11 more miles. She was starting to believe this crazy plan might actually work. The third day, her luck ran out. She woke up to a sky the color of lead and a wind that smelled of snow. She pushed the herd hard, trying to outrun the storm, but it hit her just 5 miles from the railroad camp. It was a full-blown blizzard with blinding snow and a bitter wind. The cattle panicked and scattered in every direction. For a heart-stopping second, she thought it was all over. Then she heard Ethan's voice in her head. "You do not stop a stampede. You turn it." She spurred Molly on, riding in a wide circle around the frantic animals, slowly forcing them to turn back on themselves. It was dangerous work. One slip and she would be trampled. But she kept at it, and slowly the stampede became a circle, until the exhausted cattle finally huddled together, safe but scared. She took a quick count, her heart sinking. 28. She was missing 2. In this storm, she could not go looking for them. She had to choose between the two she lost and the 28 she had. It was the hardest choice of her life, but she knew she had to save the main herd. 4 hours later, frozen and bone-tired, she saw the lights of the railroad camp glowing through the snow. She had made it. The camp foreman, a man named Carson, helped her pen the cattle. He sat her down in a warm tent with a cup of real coffee. "You drove this herd by yourself?" he asked, looking at her with a mix of shock and respect. "Yes, sir." "Through that blizzard?" Carson let out a low whistle. "Well, I will be. That is some serious grit. We will take a look at your cattle tomorrow when this clears up. If they are healthy, we will talk about a price." She had done it. Against all the odds, she had gotten the herd here. Now she just had to pray that 28 head of cattle would be enough. She spent the night in a spare bunk but did not get much sleep. She kept seeing the 2 lost cows wandering alone in the storm. She had made the only choice she could, but it still felt like a failure. The numbers she had been running in her head for months were unforgiving, and now she was too short. At dawn, she went to check on the herd. They looked thin and tired, but they were alive. She counted them again, hoping for a miracle. Still 28. Carson found her there, his expert eye sizing up each animal. He walked through the pen, checking them over without a word. Clara stayed quiet, letting the cattle speak for her. They were not prime beef, but she had kept them alive through a brutal winter. "They are lean," Carson said at last, "but they are healthy. I do not see any sickness." He turned and looked straight at Clara. "How does a woman like you end up ranching all by herself?" "I inherited the place from my uncle. He passed on about 3 months ago." "And before that?" "Before that," she said, meeting his gaze, "I was a seamstress in Philadelphia." Carson's eyebrows shot up. "A seamstress? Model facing mountain storms all by yourself. That is a big change. I did not have much of a choice. There is always a choice. You could have packed it in and gone back east." He leaned on the corral fence. "But you did not. Why is that?" Clara searched for the right words. Because she was just plain stubborn. Because there was not a thing to go back to. And because sometime in the last 3 months, she had stopped running from her troubles and started chasing after something better. She finally said, "Because it is mine. The ranch. This land, the whole struggle. It belongs to me. For the very first time, I own something that truly matters. I am building something here, and I am not about to let it go." Carson gave a slow nod. "I can respect that. All right, Miss Whitmore. I will give you a premium rate for your cattle, 50% over the market price." Clara did the quick math in her head, and her heart just sank. Even with that good price, 28 head of cattle would not be enough to cover the bank payment. She would still be short. Not by a whole lot, maybe $100, but when you owe money, clothes is not good enough. "Is something the matter?" Carson asked, seeing the look on her face. "No, sir. That is a fair price, more than fair." Clara forced a smile. "When can we make this official?" "Tomorrow morning. I will have the paymaster bring the paperwork by." He turned to leave, then stopped. "You know, we will need a steady supply of beef for the next 6 months while we build this line. If you can deliver quality cattle on time, I am willing to draw up a contract. Premium rates for every guaranteed delivery." Clara felt her breath catch in her throat. "How steady?" "Once a month? 20 to 30 head each time, depending on what you can spare." He looked her right in the eye. "That is, if you can handle it. That is a hard drive. Not just anybody could pull off what you just did." "I can handle it," Clara said. Her voice was steady, even with a wildfire of hope burning in her chest. A contract meant a regular income. It meant more than just surviving. It meant she could actually build a life here. "I can absolutely handle it. Then we can talk terms tomorrow." Carson tipped his hat and walked off, leaving Clara alone in the snow. She was trying to wrap her head around what just happened. She had done it. It was not perfect. She had lost 2 head of cattle, showed up half frozen, and nearly died in that storm. But she had done it. And now she had a chance at a real future. not just a mad scramble to make the next payment. But first, she had to make this one. And she was still short of the money. Clara spent the rest of the day helping out around the camp, trying her best not to worry about the numbers. $100 short, that was all. Just $100 standing between her and losing everything she had worked for. That evening, as she was about to turn in for the night, one of the camp workers came to find her. "Miss Whitmore, there is someone here asking for you." Clara's heart leaped into her throat. Had something happened back at the ranch? She followed the man outside and saw Ethan Hale standing there in the snow, his horse breathing hard from a long ride. "Ethan," Clara rushed over to him. "What on earth are you doing here? Is something wrong?" He swung down from his horse and she could see the pure exhaustion on his face. "I brought you something." He walked back to his horse and untied something from his saddle. It was 2 cows. The very 2 she had lost in the storm. Clara just stared at them, then back at Ethan, not quite believing her eyes. "How did you find them?" "I followed your trail the day before yesterday. I just wanted to be sure you made it across that first river all right." He rubbed his tired face. "When the storm blew in, I pushed hard to catch up, thinking you might need a hand. I found the tracks from your main herd heading this way, but saw 2 sets of tracks going the other way. I tracked them down yesterday and brought them in today. You tracked them through the mountains? In that storm?" "Well, after the storm, mostly. Tracking them during the storm would have been plain foolish." He managed a weary smile. "I am not that stupid." Clara felt a tight ache in her chest. "You did not have to do this. You had your own roundup to worry about. Diego can handle the roundup. He has been wrangling cattle since before I was born." Ethan looked at her, his expression softer than she had ever seen it. "Besides, I figured you could use these. Unless you do not want them." "Do not want them?" "Ethan, these 2 cows are the difference between me making my payment and losing the ranch. Of course I want them. I just—" Her voice cracked a little. "Why would you do this for me?" He was quiet for a long moment. The sounds of the camp, men talking and equipment clanging, just faded away into the background. "Because when you rode out into that storm to save your cattle," Ethan said at last, "I realized something. I had been telling myself I was helping you because I owed your uncle a debt, or that it was just my neighborly duty. All these sensible reasons that let me pretend I was being logical about it." He stepped a little closer. "But that was a lie. I have been helping you because somewhere in the last 3 months, watching you refuse to give up, watching you become someone who belongs to this land, I stopped seeing you as a problem to solve. I started seeing you as someone I could not stand to lose." Clara felt like all the air had been pulled from her lungs. "Ethan, you do not have to say anything. I know this is not the right time or place, but when I thought about you out there alone, I thought about all the things that could go wrong." He shook his head. "I could not let that happen, so I followed you. And when I found these 2 wandering in the mountains, I brought them back because you need them, and because I need you to succeed." The words just hung there in the cold air, honest and raw. Clara had spent 3 months learning the language of cattle and land and weather. But this was something else entirely. This was the language of trust, something she had given up on after Philadelphia, after the man who had stolen all her savings. But this was Ethan. He had taught her everything. He had pushed her when she needed it and caught her when she fell. And now he had brought her 2 cows that meant the difference between survival and failure. "I need to tell you something, too," Clara said softly. "When I first got here, I was running away from Philadelphia. I was escaping a slow death in that city, and this was the only way out." She looked him square in the eye. "But it stopped being about running away. It started being about running toward this land, this life, and—" She took a breath. "Toward you." The look on his face changed. His eyes lit up with something hot and strong. "Clara, you've given me everything these last 3 months. More than just know-how or supplies. You gave me a reason to be someone better, someone who belongs. Her voice grew steady. I have to make this ranch work. Not just for the bank or to prove folks wrong. I need it to work because this place is the first thing that has ever been mine, and I aim to keep it. Every last bit of it. Ethan knew exactly what she meant. He crossed the space between them and kissed her. It was not a gentle thing. It was sure and strong, and it felt like the cold wind and pure hope all at once. When he pulled back, she was breathless and grinning. Well, Ethan said, his voice a little rough, I suppose that is one way to seal a deal. Partnership? If you think I'm letting you make that drive alone every month, you are a bigger fool than I thought. We will do it together. We will combine our herds, make the drive quicker, and split the money. He touched her cheek. That is, if you want a partner, in ranching or in life. Both, she said. But I should warn you, I am not easy to live with. You can ask Diego. Clara laughed, letting go of 3 months of worry. I'm not easy either. Just ask anyone in Valley Creek. Then we will be difficult together. He pulled her in, and for the first time since she arrived, Clara felt completely safe. They talked all night, the kind of honest talk that happens when you stop being careful. He told her about his own hard times, the year he nearly lost it all, and the loneliness of working the land by himself. She told him about Philadelphia, the factory, and the man who broke her trust. She confessed how this ranch felt like her last chance, and how scared she was of failing. You have not failed, Ethan said. You have survived, you have learned. You have become what this land needs. What about what I need? He smiled. You need someone who will work beside you, not above you. Someone who knows who you are and would not change a thing. He took her hand. I can be that man, if you let me. Clara held his hand, feeling the work-roughened skin that matched her own. I will let you. The next morning, Carson settled up. 30 head of cattle at a premium price, plus a contract for delivery every month for the next 6 months. Clara had to read the payment draft twice. It was enough to pay the bank, fix the barn roof, buy winter supplies, and maybe even get a proper bed. You earned this, Carson said, his voice full of respect. Not many folks could have done what you did. Thank you, sir. Thank the land, he grunted. It did not kill you, so I reckon it likes you. I will see you in a month, Miss Whitmore. Clara and Ethan rode back to the valley side by side. The mountains looked sharp and beautiful against a brilliant blue sky. The world felt clean and new. What are you thinking about? Ethan asked after a while. I am remembering that first day you rode up and told me I was going to die out here. Clara smiled. You were mighty sure of yourself. I was wrong. It happens, but I'm glad I was wrong. This valley needs someone like you, someone too stubborn to quit. The valley or you? Both. As they rode on, Clara thought about the woman she was 3 months ago, scared and desperate. That woman would not recognize the person she was now, hardened by the weather, confident on her horse. But the hope that drove her here had not disappeared. It had just gotten tougher. When she saw her ranch from the ridge, it looked different. It was still run down, the fences still needed mending, but it was hers, and it was surviving. The town's reaction was a mixed bag. Diego and a few others were happy for her. Davis, who bet she would fail, was plain resentful. Garrett just nodded when they told him the news. You proved something, he said. Not sure what, but this valley has room for your kind of stubborn. Does that make me a rancher now? Clara asked. Garrett smiled. I would say so, but you might want to fix that barn before the first snow. Mitchell, the banker, was shocked when Clara paid down her debt. I honestly did not think you would make it, he said. I am glad I was wrong. Everybody is glad they were wrong, Clara told him. The bank manager was not so pleased, but he took the money. You have bought yourself some time, he said. Do not waste it. I will not. In the weeks that followed, Clara and Ethan found their groove. She kept her ranch. Her independence was too hard-won to give up. But they worked together on the big jobs, fixing her barn and planning the next cattle drive. In the evenings, they sat on her porch and talked about the future, about growing their herds. and about what the railroad contract meant for them. "I want to stay," Clara said one night. "This place nearly broke me, but it also made me. I'm not ready to leave." "Good," Ethan said. "I am not going anywhere either. Diego goes where the work is good and the boss is not a pain. Right now, that is here." Ethan pulled her close. "But Clara, if we are going to do this for real, we need to sort out the details, like whether we merge the ranches or get married or just stay partners in business. Whether you want to rebuild your house or move into mine." He looked at her seriously. "I am not trying to take over. I respect what you built here, but working together would make us both stronger." She had been turning it over and over in her head. "I want to merge the properties," she said, "but I want both houses kept up. We can live in yours since it is in better shape, but mine stays as a reminder of where I started. That is fair. And my name goes on everything," she added, "not just as your wife, if that happens, but as an equal partner, Clara Whitmore, rancher, not just Ethan Hale's wife." Ethan smiled. "Clara, I saw you push 30 head of cattle through a blizzard all by yourself. I have watched you become one of the finest ranchers I have ever known in just 3 hard months. You think I would ever see you as just someone's wife? Some men would. I am not some men." He turned to her. "And yes, I want to marry you, not to save you, but because I have worked this land by myself for 35 years and I am tired of being alone. I want an equal partner, someone to challenge me, to push me and make me a better person." His voice got quiet. "I want you, Clara. All of you. The stubborn woman from Philadelphia who would not quit. The rancher who rides headfirst into storms. The woman who changed her whole life because she had to. All of it." Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes. The good kind. The kind that comes when something that has been locked up tight in your chest finally breaks open. "Yes?" "Yes, to which part?" "Yes, to all of it. Merging the ranches, being partners, getting married, building a life together right here." She gave him a slow, sure kiss. "Yes, to the future we are making." They were married 3 weeks later. It was a small ceremony, but most of the valley turned out to watch. Clara stood before the preacher in a dress she had made herself with the money from her first cattle sale. She looked at Ethan and promised to build a life with him. The valley came around to accepting her, slowly but surely. Her success with the railroad contract helped. The fact that her herd stayed healthy through the winter helped even more. By the next spring, she had earned something more valuable than acceptance. She had earned their respect. Davis never did forgive her for proving him wrong, but even he stopped making smart comments about how long she would last. Garrett started asking for her opinion on valley business. The other ranchers treated her like one of their own, not some outsider playing a part she did not understand. But the real change was not in how other people saw her. It was in how Clara saw herself. She had stopped thinking of herself as a seamstress pretending to be a rancher. She was no longer waiting for someone to call her a fraud. She was a rancher, not because she married Ethan and not because she inherited the land. She was a rancher because she had earned it with plain hard work and by refusing to fail. The railroad contract lasted the full 6 months, and then they extended it. The combined Hale and Whitmore Ranch became one of the most dependable in the whole region. They grew their herd and improved their land. Clara's old ranch house was repaired and kept up just like she wanted. Sometimes, when the work was especially hard, she would ride over there and stand on the porch that no longer sagged. She would look out at the barn with its new roof and the fences that stood up straight. And she would remember that first night. She would remember the fear and how impossible it all seemed. And she would honor the woman she used to be by being the person that woman had fought so hard to become. It took nearly a year for Clara to become the woman she needed to be. One quiet evening, she and Ethan sat on their porch watching the sun dip behind the mountains. She finally thought of the house as theirs, not just his. From the barn, they could hear Diego singing softly in Spanish as he finished his chores. The cattle were settled, and a deep peace settled over the land. The kind of quiet that only comes after a long day of honest work. Ethan broke the silence. Do you ever have second thoughts? He asked. About staying? About choosing all of this? Clara pictured Philadelphia, with its grimy factories and crowded streets. She remembered the scared woman she used to be, running from a life that offered her nothing. Never, she said, her voice full of conviction. This land did everything it could to break me. It took all I had and then asked for more. But it gave me something the city never could. Ethan looked at her. And what is that? A choice, she said, leaning against his solid shoulder. In Philadelphia, I was just surviving. I had no say in my own future. But out here, I am building one. Every fence I mend, every calf I pull through a tough night, every storm I weather, those are my decisions. This life is mine in a way nothing has ever been before. The struggle is what makes it worth having. She gave him a small smile. Besides, having a good partner helps. Ethan chuckled, pulling her a little closer. Just good? I will take it. Clara looked out at the valley that had failed to defeat her. She had claimed this land not with a piece of paper, but with her own sweat and hard work. Her future was not something she was given. It was something she had fought for, tooth and nail. Just 3 months ago, she had shown up with a beat-up trunk, a handful of dollars, and a telegram that promised only hardship. She was a seamstress from Philadelphia who had never seen a cow up close, let alone imagine she could survive in a place so unforgiving. That woman was long gone. In her place stood Clara Whitmore Hale, a rancher, a wife, and a true survivor. She belonged to this land because she had earned the right to be here. The inheritance she never wanted turned into the life she would choose over and over again. The valley that was supposed to shatter her had instead forged her into someone stronger. As the setting sun painted the mountains gold, Clara understood the simple truth about survival. It is not about being the strongest or the smartest. It is about the simple refusal to quit. It is about turning fear into grit and turning challenges into opportunities. The land had not gone easy on her. It had tested her with everything it had, and she had passed. It was not pretty, and it was not easy, but she had made it. She was finally home. The failing ranch she had inherited was now thriving, thanks in part to the quiet cowboy next door who became her partner. But the most important change was the one that happened inside of her, and that was a legacy worth fighting for. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.